Welcome to Controlled Pairs Gaming. I'm Controlled Pairs, and I play the most immersive PC games in the world. DCS World is one of those games, and I'd always wanted to play it, but I'd always kind of been intimidated by the steep learning curve and the barrier to entry that is DCS World. Because in order to play the game, you basically have to learn how to pilot an aircraft. For those not familiar, DCS World is a game on Steam and a standalone version available on their website. It stands for Digital Combat Simulator, and it's a flight simulator. And the models in the game are almost a one-to-one scale, both in function and in appearance, to real-world military aircraft. And it's initially, anyway, a free-to-play game that comes with one entirely free map that is based off the Caucasus regions, and it also comes with a completely free-to-play Su-25T, which is like the Russian attack plane equivalent to the NATO or US A-10 Warthog. And the Su-25T is referred to in NATO nomenclature as the Frogfoot. It also comes with the TF or TP-51 Mustang, which is the training variant to the legendary P-51 Mustang of the World War II Warbird era. The training variant doesn't have any weapons, and so it's kind of fun to play with and fly around, but you can't really use it in any missions. So I jumped into the Su-25T, and I spent about 2 days learning how to fly the aircraft through YouTube tutorials and just kind of study and trial and error. And it was a steep barrier to entry, but it ended up being a very rewarding experience. And I finally took a swing at some of the missions that are available for free with the Su-25T. And the one that kind of really stuck out to me, and the one that I attempted a couple times, and you're about to see my final and most successful attempt at it, was a mission to strike a Georgian command post. So this is kind of a historic replication of the Russian-Georgia war that happened earlier in the 2000s, where Russia, basically led an incursion into Georgian territory east of the Black Sea in the Caucasus region. And in this particular scenario, I'm flying a Russian Su-25T Frogfoot as part of a strike force that is doing a breach into Georgian airspace. And there's multiple flights. We're supported by some MiGs and some flankers, and they're performing some suppression of enemy air defenses, basically punching down the Georgian SAMs, the surface-to-air missile sites, so that my flight of Su-25T Frogfoots can get into the airspace and then perform a couple of precision strikes on a Georgian airfield. My specific target are these two command posts that are just north and east of this east-west running airfield that we're flying to. And so as we kind of take a look at the scenario now, you can see that in order to start the aircraft, we're actually already positioned on the runway. And we really only requirement is to kind of look around us, make sure everything's functioning correctly, and then punch that throttle all the way forward, holding the wheel brake, and then let off the wheel brake and begin to roll. Our wingman does so with us, and then we rotate and begin climbing, gear up, flaps up, and then orient on our first waypoint. And we begin to navigate our way into the target area, kind of build up some speed, keep an eye on our wingman during the transit, and make sure that we're still on course, keeping an eye also on all of our weapons and make sure that they're prepared to fight whenever we arrive, and also taking a look at our fuel down in the fuel gauge. If you're kind of curious how the camera is moving around within my cockpit, most of y'all probably are already very well aware of this, certainly all the DCS veterans, but for those of you who just play first-person shooters and have historically only enjoyed that sort of content on my channel, the way that I'm kind of moving the camera around the cockpit is through this free software called FreeTrack No IR, which is actually a budget version of a more expensive software called Track IR. Track IR, which is more prevalent in the DCS community, is a piece of hardware coupled with software that uses a bunch of lights that are affixed to a ball cap or a clip that you wear in your headset, and then a camera that is provided with that program monitors its position in space, so it can actually see when you turn your head left, right, up, down, and it moves your head around the cockpit in a realistic way. So this frees up your HOTAS or the hat on your joystick or the keybinds, so you don't have to worry about manipulating those keys. Instead, you can just very naturally turn your head and enjoy the range of motion and the situational awareness that comes from doing that. The solution I went with, the free track no IR, is only $3.50 or something like that US. It's a pretty good piece of software. It uses a native webcam that if you already have a webcam laying around, I had one from a few years ago that I just plugged into the computer, and it was really just plug and play. And so in about 30 minutes of using it or so, it was tuned pretty nicely and certainly worked for the budget build flight sim kit that I'm fighting off of here. So we're continuing to navigate our way towards the objective area. And I keep looking over to the right, taking a look at my wingman, and I start getting notifications that our allied flights are beginning to engage the Georgian SAMs, and then ultimately we receive authorization to pass into Georgian airspace. So at this time we become targetable by the Georgian military. We're expecting that we could end up with some radar contacts here momentarily, and as you hear that beep periodically in the background, that beep, beep, beep over and over again, that is my RWR, or the radar warning receiver, notifying me through an audible signature that a radar system of some sort has located me. It doesn't mean that they're locked onto me or preparing to fire a missile. It means that they can observe me and that they're aware of my radar signature. If I look at that RWR receiver, which is in the lower right of my cockpit, and you'll see me do that periodically, I'm looking to see where the direction of that radar contact is coming from. So if they can detect me, I can also detect them with the radar system that's located on the aircraft. And I can also get an idea of what sort of threat that is. So each one of the little bulbs beneath the RWR indicates a different type of threat, be it an air threat, a long range, mid range, or short range ground threat. So I'm taking a look at all those things in real time as I'm flying. In addition to that, now that we're getting ready to cross into the Georgian airspace, I'm also prepping to execute my bombing mission. And so I know I've got to target these two different command posts on board the Su-25T Frogfoot. It's a precision attack platform. So I've got this electro-optical sensor that allows me to laser designate or TV designate using this high-powered camera so that I can drop precision-guided munitions with incredible accuracy. So I'm preparing to drop two of those precision-guided munitions on each of, or one on each command post. And before I do that, I go ahead and I make sure that I'm only going to drop one at a time. So by pressing V or Victor on my keyboard and then looking down to the bottom left of my cockpit, you'll see that I select an option to only deploy one bomb when I pull the trigger, as opposed to dropping a whole slew or a whole load of bombs. That might be the more Hollywood solution, but less efficient. I also select an interval between bombs. So should I expend both of my laser guided munitions and want to switch to a more traditional method of an engagement, I want the option then to drop a bunch of bombs at once. And so when I do that, I've set an interval between my bombs. So after 0.3 seconds with the trigger depressed, I will drop a bomb every 0.3 seconds should I choose to drop more than one at a time. But right now I'm planning on dropping one bomb per target, and I'm preparing my weapon systems to do that. As you can see, as we get kind of closer into Georgian airspace, and my RWR, that radar warning receiver, goes from that audible beep over and over again into a solid beep that immediately triggers a level of response for me. That's because we went from being initially just not located but not locked up by any sort of radar system, and when you have that solid audible beeping tone, that's the radar warning receiver now telling me that I have been locked up and it's time for me to go defensive or evasive, potentially based off what that threat is and its location. We're actually outside of the engagement range of those SAMs, but just in case, I took myself and my wingman down into the terrain to break that radar that line of sight the radar had to my aircraft, and I got down in the valley a little bit, which kind of complicates the bombing approach that I'll have to develop later on in the fight, but at least breaks the line of sight that the radar has to the aircraft, so they can't lock me up anymore, and it makes sure that we can allow our suppression of enemy air defense, our seed flights, to take care of those SAMs before we move into the target area. Once we break that radar lock and I'm satisfied that the enemy air defenses around our target area have been destroyed, we go ahead and we climb back up into a bombing altitude, and then we activate that EO sensor, that high-powered camera on the nose of the aircraft, and I begin slewing around looking for our targets. Sure enough, off in the distance, we manage to locate them, and then we do 2 full passes where we deploy our laser-guided munitions, making sure we've got wings level, located the target, and then drop those ordnance. With hits on each of the command posts, and we still have some rounds remaining, some munitions remaining, I elect for some passes parallel to the runway where we'll drop traditional munitions over 2 different structures that were initially reported as ammunition supply points in our pre-mission briefing. And so we do a pass and drop 2 bombs on that one pass to destroy those ammunition bunkers, and somewhere during that time, as we're going through that engagement, we're also notified through the AWACS in our higher headquarters that an enemy SAM still active 40 kilometers off to our east. Sure enough, my wingman and I are still equipped with anti-radiation seeking missiles, meaning that we are capable of engaging those surface-to-air missile sites even though it is at considerable risk. However, our aircraft are a little bit lighter now. We've gotten some munitions off of them so they can move a little bit quicker, although now I'm also concerned about how much fuel I have remaining, so I'm constantly looking down at that fuel gauge, but we're tasked to go ahead and hunt those SAMs, and so we begin doing so. I look at my radar warning receiver, I turn on the radar tracking sensor in my HUD, and I begin looking for those SAM sites. We drop our altitude nice and low. Once we have those SAMs located, we lock them up, and then we start closing the distance until we can get within engagement range of those SAM sites. As we close the distance, we're also putting ourselves at greater risk because, of course, the closer you get to the SAM, the more likely that SAM is to engage you as soon as you're within his range. And I know that with the missiles I'm engaging with, it'll be right at the edge of that other surface-to-air missiles range, so I can expect that around the time I'm engaging him, he should be attempting to engage me. To mitigate this, after I locate that SAM, I drop my altitude nice and low so he can't see me, even though I can still have a pretty good idea of where he's at. And I use the terrain to mask my signature. Once I'm closer and I'm comfortable that when I bump, I will be in range of that SAM and able to engage it quickly, my wingman and I increase our speed significantly, then immediately climb, and as soon as we climb and get a good angle of attack, we level out the nose, lock up the first SAM site and engage, and then immediately transition to the second and engage, and then break off, bank hard, and then begin popping both chaff and flare. We turn away, we dive, we give those missiles time to impact, get confirmation on screen that in fact both of those air defense sites were destroyed, and then satisfied that we're reasonably safe, we go ahead and climb to a travel altitude and begin navigating home. We cross back into friendly airspace and continuously check fuel. Looks like we're going to have enough to get home, but we're not going to have a whole lot to play with once we get there, so we navigate our way back to our home airfield, immediately contact the tower, request permission to land, line it up, drop flaps, drop gear, put the nose on the runway, and then fight just above stall speed until we're able to put her down on the runway and then taxi, park, and then pop the canopy for a conclusion of the mission. DCS World is something new to the channel. It's something that I really did enjoy. I found it incredibly immersive and rewarding. It was also really hard to learn the aircraft. If it's something that you guys would like to see more of or that you find interesting, let me know in the comments below. If you play DCS World and are willing to lend a hand, I could absolutely use a great instructor. Until next time, this is Controlled Pairs, signing off.